Okay, assignment number 17, Salem's Lot. 2 left. We are definitely coming to the end of it now. Who is going to survive, who is not? Although we know who's going to survive, specifically who's going to get out of the town. Of course, that would be Ben and Mark, because we've already seen them later when they traveled across the country in the beginning of the book, because remember, this is all a flashback. But let's find out what happens. Specifically, what happens with Father Callahan. We know he has been tainted. Is he going to get through? I don't want to say anything. I have things that I want to say, but I don't want to say because I don't want to give anything away. Where are we today? Assignment number 17 has 18 questions, and it starts in part 3, The Deserted Village, chapter 14, The Lot, 4, part 32. So again, we are in part 3, The Deserted Village, chapter 14, The Lot, 4, and we are in part 32. As always, please get any little kids out of earshot, please. They should not be listening to this novel. This is way too mature for any little kids, little brothers or sisters or nephews or nieces or anything like that. So please get them out, and please you enjoy. So let's go. 32. Hey, the bus driver said. This is Hartford, Mac. Callahan looked out the wide, polarized window at the strange country, made even stranger by the first seeping light of morning. In the lot, they would be going back now, back into their holes. I know, he said. We got a 20-minute rest stop. Don't you want to go in and get a sandwich or something? Callahan fumbled in his wallet. I'm sorry. Pardon me. Callahan fumbled his wallet out of his pocket with his bandaged hand and almost dropped it. Oddly, the burned hand didn't seem to hurt much anymore. It was only numb. It would have been better if there had been pain. Pain was at least real. The taste of death was in his mouth, a moronic, mealy taste like a spoiled apple. Was that all? Yes. That was bad enough. He held out a 20. Can you get the bottle? Mister, the rules. Change, of course. A pint would be fine. I don't need nobody cutting up on my bus, mister. We'll be in New York in 2 hours. You can get what you want there. Anything. I think you're wrong, friend, Callahan thought. He looked in the wallet again to see what was there. A 10, 2 5s, a single. He added the 10 to the 20 and held it out in his bandaged hand. A pint would be fine, he said. And keep the change, of course. The driver looked from the $30 to the dark, socketed eyes, and for one terrible moment thought he was holding conversation with a living skull, a skull that had somehow forgotten how to grin. $30 for a pint? Mister, you're crazy. But he took the money, walked to the front of the empty bus, then turned back. The money had disappeared. But don't you go cutting up on me. I don't need nobody cutting up on my bus. Callahan nodded like a very small boy accepting a deserved reprimand. The bus driver looked at him a moment longer, then got off. Something cheap, Callahan thought. Something that will burn the tongue and sizzle the throat. Something to take away that bland, sweet taste, or at least allay it until he could find a place to begin drinking in earnest, to drink and drink and drink. He thought then that he might break down, begin to cry. There were no tears. He felt very dry and completely empty. There was only the taste. Hurry, driver. He went out looking out the window. Across the street, a teenage boy was sitting on a porch stoop with his head folding into his arms. Callahan watched him until the bus pulled out again, but the boy never moved. 33. Ben felt a hand on his arm and swam upward to wakefulness. Mark, near his right ear, said, Morning. He opened his eyes, blinked twice to clear the gum out of them, and looked out the window at the world. Dawn had come stealing through a steady autumn rain that was neither heavy nor light. The trees which ringed the grassy pavilion on the hospital's north side were half denuded now, and the black branches were limed against a gray sky, like giant letters in an unknown alphabet. Route 30, which curved out of town to the east, was as shiny as sealskin. A car passing with its taillights still on left baleful red reflections on the macadam. Ben stood up and looked around. Matt was sleeping, his chest rising and falling in regular but shallow respiration. Jimmy was also asleep, stretched out in the room's one lounge chair. There was an undoctor-like stubble on the planes of his cheeks, and Ben ran a palm across his own face. It rasped. Time to get going, isn't it? Mark asked. Ben nodded. He thought of the day ahead of them and all its potential hideousness and shied away from it. The only way to get through it would be without thinking more than 10 minutes ahead. He looked into the boy's face, and the stony eagerness he saw there made him feel queasy. He went over and shook Jimmy. Huh? Jimmy said. He thrashed in his chair like a swimmer coming up from deep water. His face twitched, his eyes fluttered open, and for a moment they showed blank terror. He looked at them both unreasoningly without recognition. Then recognition came and his body relaxed. Oh, dream. Mark nodded in perfect understanding. Jimmy looked out the window and said, daylight, the way a miser might say money. He got up and went over to Matt, took his wrist and held it. Is he all right? Mark asked. I think he's better than he was last night, Jimmy said. Ben, I want the three of us to leave by way of the service elevator in case someone noticed Mark last night. The less risk, the better. Will Mr. Burke be okay alone? Mark asked. I think so, Ben said. We'll have to trust to his ingenuity, I guess. Barlow would like nothing better than to have us tied up another day. They tiptoed down the corridor and used the service elevator. The kitchen was just cranking up at this hour, almost 7:15. One of the cooks looked up, waved a hand, and said, "Hi, Doc." No one else spoke to them. "Where first?" Jimmy asked. "The Brock Street School?" "No," Ben said. "Too many people until this afternoon." "Do the little ones get out early, Mark?" "They go until 2 o'clock. That leaves plenty of daylight," Ben said. "Mark's house first. Steaks." 34. As they drew closer to the lot, an almost palpable cloud of dread formed in Jimmy's Buick, and conversation lagged. When Jimmy pulled off the turnpike at the large green reflectorized sign that read Route 12, Jerusalem's Lot, Cumberland Center, Ben thought that this was the way he and Susan had come home after their first date. She'd wanted to see something with a car chase in it. "It's gone bad," Jimmy said. His boy's face looked pale and frightened and angry. "Christ, you can almost smell it." And you could, Ben thought, although the smell was mental rather than physical. A psychic whiff of tombs. Route 12 was nearly deserted. On the way in, they passed Win Puritan's milk truck, parked off the road and deserted. The motor was idling, and Ben turned it off after looking in the back. Jimmy glanced at him inquiringly as he got back in. Ben shook his head. "He's not there." The engine light was on, and it was almost out of gas. Been idling there for hours. Jimmy pounded his leg with a closed fist. But as they entered town, Jimmy said in an almost absurdly relieved tone, "Look there. Crossings is open." It was. Milt was out front, fussing a plastic drop cover over his rack of newspapers, and Lester Silvis was standing next to him, dressed in a yellow slicker. "Don't see the rest of the crew, though," Ben said. Milt glanced up at Ben and waved, and Ben thought he saw lines of strain on both men's faces. A closed sign was still posted inside the door of Foreman's mortuary. The hardware store was also closed, and Spencer's was locked and dark. The diner was open, and after they had passed it, Jimmy pulled his Buick up to the curb in front of the new shop. Above the show window, simple gold-faced letters spelled out the name, Barlow and Straker, Fine Furnishings. And taped to the door, as Callahan had said, a sign which had been hand-lettered in a fine script which they all recognized from the note they had seen the day before, closed until further notice. "Why are you stopping here?" Mark asked. "Just on the off chance that he might be hauling up inside," Jimmy said. "It's so obvious he might figure we'd overlook it. And I think that sometimes customs men put an okay on boxes they check through. They write on it with chalk." They went around to the back, and while Ben and Mark hunched their shoulders against the rain, Jimmy poked one overcoated elbow through the glass in the back door until they could all climb inside. The air was noxious and stale, the air of a room shut up for centuries rather than days. Ben poked his head out into the showroom, but there was no place to hide out there. Sparsely furnished, there was no sign that Straker had been replenishing his stock. "Come here," Jimmy called hoarsely, and Ben's heart leaped into his throat. Jimmy and Mark were standing by a long crate which Jimmy had pried open with the claw end of his hammer. Looking in, they could see one pale hand and a dark sleeve. Without thinking, Ben attacked the crate. Jimmy was fumbling at the far end with the hammer. "Ben," Jimmy said, "you're going to cut your hands. You—" He hadn't heard. He snapped boards off the crate, regardless of nails and splinters. They had him. They had the slimy knife thing, and he would pound the steak into him as he had pounded into Susan. He would. He snapped back another piece of cheap wooden crating and looked into the dead, moon-pallid face of Mike Ryerson. For a moment, there was utter silence, and then they all let out their breath. It was as if a soft wind had coursed through the room. "What do we do now?" Jimmy asked. "We better get out to Mark's house first," Ben said. His voice was dull with disappointment. "We know where he is. We don't even have a finished steak yet." They put the splintered strips of wood back helter-skelter. "Better let me look at those hands," Jimmy said. "They're bleeding." "Later," Ben said. "Come on." They went back around the building, all of them wordlessly glad to be back in the open air, and Jimmy drove the Buick up Jointner Avenue and into the residential part of town, just outside the skimpy business district. They arrived at Mark's house perhaps sooner than any of them would have liked. Father Callahan's old sedan was parked behind Henry Petrie's sensible Pinto runabout in the circular Petrie driveway. At the sight of it, Mark sucked in his breath and looked away. All color had drained out of his face. "I can't go in there," he muttered. "I'm sorry. I'll wait in the car." "Nothing to be sorry for, Mark," Jimmy said. He parked, turned off the ignition, and got out. Ben hesitated a minute, then put a hand on Mark's shoulder. "Are you going to be all right?" "Sure." But he did not look all right. His chin was trembling and his eyes looked hollow. He suddenly turned to Ben, and the hollowness was gone from the eyes, and they were filled with simple pain, swimming with tears. "Cover them up, will you? If they're dead, cover them up." "Sure I will," Ben said. "It's better this way," Mark said. "My father, he would have made a very successful vampire. Maybe as good as Barlow in time. He was good at everything he tried. Maybe too good." "Not to think too much," Ben said, hating the lame sound of the word that they left his mouth. Mark looked at him and smiled wanly. "The wood pile is around in the back," Mark said. "You can go faster if you use my father's lathe down in the basement." "All right," Ben said. "Be easy, Mark, as easy as you can." But the boy was looking away now, swiping at his eyes with his arm. He and Jimmy went up the back steps and inside. 35. "Callahan's not here," Jimmy said flatly. They had gone through the entire house. Ben forced himself to say it. Barlow must have gotten them. He looked at the broken cross in his hand. It had been around Callahan's neck yesterday. It was the only trace of him they had found. It had been lying next to the bodies of the Petries, who were very dead indeed. Their heads had been crushed together with force enough to literally shatter their skulls. Ben remembered the unnatural strength Mrs. Glick had displayed and felt sick. Come on, he said to Jimmy. We got to cover them up. I promised. 36. They took the dust cover from the couch in the living room and covered them with that. Ben tried to not to look at or think about what they were doing, but it was impossible. When the job was done, one hand, the cultivated lacquered nails, revealed it to be June Petrie's, protruded from under the gaily patterned dust cover, and he poked it underneath with his toe, grimacing in an effort to keep his stomach under control. The shapes of the bodies under the cover were undeniable and unmistakable, making him think of news photos from Vietnam, battlefield dead and soldiers carrying dreadful burdens in black rubber sacks that looked absurdly like golf bags. They went downstairs, each with an armload of yellow ash stove lengths. The cellar had been Henry Petrie's domain, and it reflected his personality perfectly. 3 high-intensity lights had been hung in a straight line over the work area, each shaded with a wide metal shell that allowed the light to fall with strong brilliance on the planer, the jigsaw, the bench saw, the lathe, the electric sander. Ben saw that he had been building a bird hotel, probably to place in the backyard next spring, and the blueprint he had been working from was neatly laid out and held at each corner with machined metal paperweights. He had been doing a competent but uninspired job, and now it would never be finished. The floor was neatly swept, but a pleasantly nostalgic odor of sawdust hung in the air. This isn't going to work at all, Jimmy said. I know that, Ben said. The wood pile, Jimmy snorted, and let the wood fall from his arms in a lumbering crash. The stove lengths rolled wildly on the floor like jackstraws. He uttered a high hysterical laugh. Jimmy? But his laugh cut across Ben's attempt to speak like jags of piano wire. We're going to go out and end the scourge with a pile of wood from Henry Petrie's back lot? How about some chair legs or baseball bats? Jimmy, what else can we do? Jimmy looked at him and got himself under control with a visible effort. Some treasure hunt, he said. Go 40 paces into Charles Griffin's north pasture and look under the large rock. Ha! Jesus! We can get out of town. We can do that. You want to quit? Is that what you want? No. But it isn't going to be just today, Ben. It's going to be weeks before we get them all, if we ever do. Can you stand that? Can you stand doing what you did to Susan 1,000 times, pulling out of their closets and their stinking little bowl hose, screaming and struggling, only to pound a stake into their chest cavities and smash their hearts? Can you keep that up until November without going nuts? Ben thought about it and met a blank wall, utter incomprehension. I don't know, he said. Well, what about the kid? Do you think he can take it? He'll be ready for the fucking nuthatch, and Matt will be dead. I'll guarantee you that. And what do we do when the state cops start nosing around to find out what in the hell happened to Salem's lot? What do we tell them? Pardon me while I stake this bloodsucker? What about that, Ben? How the hell should I know? Who's had a chance to stop and think this thing out? They realized simultaneously they were standing nose to nose, yelling at each other. Hey, Jimmy said. Hey. Ben dropped his eyes. I'm sorry. No, my fault. We were under pressure. What Barlow would undoubtedly call an end game. He ran a hand through his carroty hair and looked around aimlessly. His eyes suddenly lit on something besides Petrie's blueprint, and he picked it up. It was a black grease pencil. Maybe this is the best way, he said. What? You stay here, Ben. Start turning out stakes. If we're going to do this, it's got to be scientific. You're the production department. Mark and I will be research. We'll go through this town looking for them. We'll find them, too, just the way we found Mike. I can mark the locations with this grease pencil. Then, tomorrow, the stakes. Won't they see the marks and move? I don't think so. Mrs. Glick didn't look as though she was connecting too well. I think they will move more on instinct than real thought. They might wise up after a while, start hiding better, but I think at first it would be like shooting fish in a barrel. Why don't I go? Because I know the town, and the town knows me, like they knew my father. The live ones in the lot are hiding in their houses today. If you come knocking, they won't answer. If I come, most of them will. I know some of the hiding places. I know where the winos shack up out in the marshes and where the pulp roads go. You don't. Can you run that lathe? Yes, Ben said. Jimmy was right, of course. Yet the relief he felt at not having to go out and face them made him feel guilty. Okay, get going. It's afternoon now. Ben turned to the lathe, then paused. If you want to wait a half hour, I can give you maybe half a dozen steaks to take with you. Jimmy paused a moment, then dropped his eyes. I think tomorrow. Tomorrow would be. Okay, Ben said. Go on. Listen, why don't you come back around 3? Things ought to be quiet enough around that school by then so we can check it out. Good. Jimmy stepped away from Petrie's shop area and started for the stairs. Something, a half thought or perhaps inspiration, made him turn. He saw Ben across the basement, working under the bright glare of those 3 lights hung neatly in a row. Something. And it was gone. He walked back. Ben shut off the lathe and looked at him. Something else? Yeah, Jimmy said. On the tip of my tongue. But it's stuck there. Ben raised his eyebrows. When I looked back from the stairs and saw you, something clicked. It's gone now. Important? I don't know. He shuffled his feet purposefully, wanting it to come back. Something about the image Ben had made, standing under those work lights, bent over the lathe. No good. Thinking about it only made it seem more distant. He went up the stairs, but paused once more to look back. The image was hauntingly familiar, but it wouldn't come. He went through the kitchen and out to the car. The rain had faded to drizzle. 37. Roy McDougal's car was standing in the driveway of the trailer lot on the Bend Road, and seeing it there on a weekday made Jimmy suspect the worst. He and Mark got out, Jimmy carrying his black bag. They mounted the steps, and Jimmy tried the bell. It didn't work, and so he knocked instead. The pounding roused no one in the McDougal trailer or in the neighboring one 20 yards down the road. There was a car in that driveway, too. Jimmy tried the storm door, and it was locked. There's a hammer in the backseat of the car, he said. Mark got it, and Jimmy smashed the glass of the storm beside the knob. Mark got it, and Jimmy smashed the glass of the storm door beside the knob. He reached through it and unsnapped the catch. The inside door was unlocked. They went in. The smell was definable instantly, and Jimmy felt his nostrils cringe against it and try to shut it out. The smell was not as strong as it had been in the basement of the Marston house, but it was just as basically offensive. The smell of rot and deadness, a wet, putrefied stink. Jimmy found himself remembering when, as boys, he and his buddies had gone out on their bikes during spring vacation to pick up the returnable beer and soft drink bottles the retreating snows had uncovered. In one of those, an orange crush bottle, he saw a small, decayed field mouse, which had been attracted by the sweetness and then been unable to get out. He had gotten a whiff of it and had immediately turned and thrown up. This smell was like that. This smell was plangently like that, sickish, sweet, and decayed sour, mixed together and fermenting wildly. He felt his gorge rise. They're here, Mark said. Somewhere. They went through the place methodically, kitchen, dining room, living room, the two bedrooms, they opened closets as they went. Jimmy thought they had found something in the master bedroom closet, but it was only a heap of dirty clothes. No cellar? Mark asked. No, but there might be a crawl space. They went around to the back and saw a small door that swung inward, set into the trailer's cheap concrete foundation. It was fastened with an old padlock. Jimmy knocked it off with 5 hard blows of the hammer, and when he pushed the half trap open, the smell hit them in a ripe wave. There they are, Mark said. Peering in, Jimmy could see 3 sets of feet, like corpses lined up on a battlefield. One set wore work boots, one wore knitted bedroom slippers, and the third set, tiny feet indeed, were bare. Family scene, Jimmy thought crazily. Reader's Digest, where are you when we need you? Unreality washed over him. The baby, he thought. How are we supposed to do that to a little baby? He made a mark with a black grease pencil on the trap and picked up the broken padlock. Let's go next door, he said. Wait, Mark said. Let me pull one of them out. Pull? Why? Maybe the daylight will kill them, Mark said. Maybe we won't have to do that with the stakes. Jimmy felt hope. Yeah, okay, which one? Not the baby, Mark said instantly. The man. You catch one foot. All right, Jimmy said. His mouth had gone cotton dry. When he swallowed, there was a click in his throat. Mark wriggled in on his stomach, the dead leaves that had drifted in crackling under his weight. He seized one of Roy McDougal's work boots and pulled. Jimmy squirmed in beside him, scraping his back on the low overhang, fighting claustrophobia. He got hold of the other boot, and together they pulled him out into the lessening drizzle and white light. What followed was almost unbearable. Roy McDougal began to writhe as soon as the light struck him full, like a man who had been disturbed in sleep. Steam and moisture came from his pores, and the skin underwent a slight sagging and yellowing. Eyeballs rolled behind the thin skin of his closed eyes. His feet kicked slowly and dreamily in the wet leaves. His upper lip curled back, showing upper incisors like those of a large dog, a German shepherd or a collie. His arms thrashed slowly, the hands clenching and unclenching, and one of them brushed Mark's shirt. When one of them brushed Mark's shirt, he jerked back with a disgusted cry. Roy turned over and began to hunch slowly back into the crawl space, arms and knees and face digging grooves into the rain-softened hummus. Jimmy noted that a hitching, Shine-Stokes type of respiration had begun as soon as the light struck the body. It stopped as soon as McDougal was wholly in shadow again. So did the moisture extrusion. When he had reached his previous resting place, McDougal turned over and lay still. Shut it, Mark said in a strangled voice. Please shut it. Jimmy closed the trap and replaced the hammered lock as well as he could. The image of McDougal's body struggling in the wet, rotted leaves like a dazed snake remained in his mind. He did not think there would ever be a time when it was not within hand's reach of his memory, even if he lived to be 100. 38. They stood in the rain, trembling, looking at each other. Next door, Mark asked. Yes, they'd be the logical ones for the McDougals to attack first. They went across, and this time their nostrils picked up the telltale odor of rot in the dooryard. The name below the doorbell was Evans. Jimmy nodded. David Evans and family. He worked as a mechanic in the audit department of Sears in Gates Falls. He had treated him a couple of years ago for a cyst or something. This time the bell worked, but there was no response. They found Miss Evans in bed. The 2 children were in a bunk bed in a single bedroom, dressed in identical pajamas that featured characters from the Pooh stories. It took longer to find Dave Evans. He had hidden himself away in the unfinished storage space over the small garage. Jimmy marked a check inside a circle on the front door and the garage door. "We're doing good," he said. 2 for 4. I'm sorry. Jimmy marked a check inside a circle on the front door and the garage door. "We're doing good," he said. 2 for 2. Mark said diffidently, "Would you hold on a minute or two? I'd like to wash my hands." "Sure," Jimmy said. "I'd like that too. The Evansons won't mind if we use their bathroom." They went inside, and Jimmy sat down in one of the living room chairs and closed his eyes. Soon he heard Mark running water in the bathroom. On the darkened screen of his eyes, he saw the mortician's table, saw the sheet covering Marjorie Glick's body start to tremble, saw her hand fall out and begin a delicate toe dance on the air. He opened his eyes. The trailer was in nicer condition than the McDougal's, neater, taken care of. He had never met Mrs. Evans, but it seemed she must have taken pride in her home. There was a neat pile of the dead children's toys in a small storage room, a room that had probably been called the laundry room in the mobile home dealer's original brochure. Poor kids. He hoped they'd enjoyed the toys while there still had been bright days and sunshine to enjoy them in. There was a tricycle, several large plastic trucks, and a play gas station, one of those caterpillars on wheels. There must have been some dandy fights over that. A toy pool table. He started to look away and then look back, startled. Blue chalk. 3 shaded lights in a row. Men walking around the green table under the bright lights, queuing up, brushing the grains of blue chalk off their fingertips. "Mark," he shouted, sitting bolt upright in the chair. "Mark!" And Mark came running with his shirt off to see what the matter was. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we stop today. Have you figured out where Barlow is? Because we've been there before. We have seen the spot where he is. And in fact, a character went down into that spot and had a really icky feeling, but did not want to go into a certain room. There was a pool table there, remember? Where have we seen a pool table in this story? In whose basement? Because that is exactly where Barlow is. A lot closer to Ben than Ben ever would have thought. I'm giving away too much. You'll find out in a little while. I left off, everybody, on part 39. So you're going to pick it up in part 3, The Deserted Village, chapter 14, The Lot 4, part 39. Again, you'll pick it up in part 3, The Deserted Village, chapter 14, The Lot 4, part 39. Everybody have a lovely day. I will see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we will read our last assignment for Salem's Lot, assignment number 18. Enjoy. Have a nice day.